Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share these knit look slippers which are made from a flat rectangle just like this. They're beginner friendly and will take you just about 1 hour to make a pair. To make these, I used Lion Brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick, which is a super bulky size 6 yarn and a 10mm crochet hook. To make a size 8 or under, you will only need 1 skein. To make bigger sizes, you will need more than a skein. Today I'll be showing you how to make size 7. If you would like to make it in any other size, don't forget to check out my blog. I have left the link in the description box below. You'll find the full written pattern there with multiple sizes listed. Now gather your supplies and let's get started. Make a slip knot and chain 21 to start. Now that we have 21 chains, let's begin row 1. Start with a slip stitch in the second chain from your hook. This is the first chain and this is the second. Work a slip stitch into that second chain. Work a slip stitch into each chain across. Now most people tend to slip stitch very tight. To avoid that, I want you to pull up that loop on your hook before you insert into the next chain and make your slip stitch. And we will do that throughout the pattern. So pull that loop up before you insert your hook. The bigger the loop on your hook, the looser your slip stitch will be. And once you do it a few times, you will get used to it and it will come naturally. So work a slip stitch into the next chain and each chain across. Repeat that all the way to the last chain. Now I only have 2 more chains to work into. I'll work a slip stitch, a loose slip stitch into each of them to end row 1. And now I should be having 20 slip stitches. Now to begin row 2, chain 1, turn, and for the second row we will be working slip stitches into the slip stitch of the previous row. And the slip stitch won't be fully visible in the front or on the top. You have to turn your work and look behind to see the 2 loops of your slip stitch. This is the back loop of your slip stitch and this is the front loop of your slip stitch. And you will only be going under one of those loops while working this row. So for the first stitch, go under just the front loop only and complete a slip stitch. And the front loop is right on top of your work here. So insert your hook under the front loop and complete a slip stitch. Now work a slip stitch in the back loop only of the next stitch. And the back loop is behind. So look behind and insert under just the back loop and complete your slip stitch. Now work a slip stitch in the front loop of the next stitch. Remember to keep it loose and pull up that loop. Now work a slip stitch in the back loop of the next stitch. So we are alternating between working in the front loop and the back loop. Next, work a slip stitch in the front loop of the next stitch. Next, work a slip stitch in the back loop of the next. So keep working like that until you work a slip stitch in the back loop of the very last slip stitch, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. I'm at the end of my row and I just have 1 more stitch to work into, and that is going to be a back loop only slip stitch. The front loop is here and the back loop is supposed to be behind, but it's hard to see and it's squished. So it is a tiny loop there, and insert your hook under that and complete your very last slip stitch. So that completes row 2, which ended in a slip stitch in the back loop only. Now chain 1 to start row 3, turn, and since we ended with a back loop only slip stitch, we will start with a back loop only slip stitch. So work a slip stitch in the back loop only of the first stitch, a slip stitch in the front loop of the next stitch, a slip stitch in the back loop only of the next stitch, a slip stitch in the front loop only of the next, slip stitch in the back loop, slip stitch in the front loop, slip stitch in the back loop. Keep working like that until you work a front loop slip stitch in the very last stitch. I'm now at the end of the row and I just finished working in the front loop. So in the next one, I'll be working a slip stitch into the back loop only. And for the last stitch, I'll be working a slip stitch into the front loop only. So that completes row 3. Now chain 1 and turn. And since we ended with a slip stitch in the front loop, we will start with a slip stitch in the front loop. So work a slip stitch in the front loop only of the first stitch, work a slip stitch in the back loop only of the next, work a slip stitch in the front loop only of the next, slip stitch in the back loop of the next, slip stitch in the front loop of the next. Keep working like that until you end with a slip stitch in the back loop of the very last stitch. I'm at the end of my row and I just have to work one more slip stitch into the back loop of the last stitch. So I look behind and go under that loop, which is slanting, and then complete my slip stitch, which will complete my row 4. And now keep repeating rows 3 and 4. Just the beginning and the end is different. That is, one starts with a slip stitch in the front loop and one starts with a slip stitch in the back loop. The trick to remember is if you ended with a slip stitch in the front loop, you will start the next row with a slip stitch in the front loop itself. And if you ended with a slip stitch in the back loop, you will start with a slip stitch in the back loop itself. So that's how, so you don't have to keep remembering the sequence, just follow that. When you reach the end of the row, just remember whether you're working into the front or the back loop and start the next row in the same way. So go ahead, keep repeating those 2 rows and work until your piece measures around 7 inches. I have now completed my rectangle and it is 7 inches wide and 9¼ inches long. This is going to fit a 9-inch foot. Now let's start shaping the slipper. For that, fold your work in half like that. You have the loop, the last loop is behind. Insert your hook through the front corner, grab that loop and pull through. Now work a line of slip stitches along this edge to join the 2 layers together. This will be the back of your slipper, and go all the way down, slip stitching along these loops at the very edge, and when you reach here, the base of your feet, work 2 slip stitches slanting like that because you want the base to be curved and not pointy. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I've grabbed the loop and pulled it through from the other side, and now let's work slip stitches along the edge, catching 1 loop from each side. Keep going through both the layers, and when you reach the base, I want you to curve inwards like that. So 1 slip stitch goes slanting and another one again, even more slanting along the base. And then you can fasten off. So you see there's a curve there, like that. Once you're fastened off, turn it inside out. And this will be the back of your slipper, and you can see that there is a curve there and it's not pointy. And now we're going to gather the front of the slipper along the toe side. To gather the toe part, we will be making a running stitch along the top edge. For that, take a 1.5 yard strand of yarn and thread it through a tapestry needle. I'll be using a contrasting color yarn to seam that side so you can see what I'm doing. Now start from this end. Make sure you have turned your slipper inside out and you don't see the slip stitches at the back. And now start from the very edge and go in and out, making running stitches. Leave a 6-inch tail on this side. Keep pulling until you have just around 6 to 7 inches left for weaving in. And now use the rest of the yarn tail to go in and out through the side. I'm going through the very edge and catching just one loop. I've reached the edge and now I will gather the slipper by pulling them from both sides like that, and I will make a couple of knots so it doesn't come undone. Make 2 tight knots. I'm not pulling it too hard because I have to cut this off because it's in a contrasting color, so you will make it tight. And then you will take your needle out of the long strand. We will be using that to seam the top part shut. So now go ahead and weave in the smaller tail along the side of your slipper. Don't go along the toe side or the base of your slipper because it's going to feel like a bulk under your feet or along your toe side. So work along the side of your slipper. Weave it in by going in and out and back. Go once for a few inches like that, and when you tug, make sure there is enough give on the toe side and you're not like pulling it down too much. And now go back in and out through the stitches, and you can trim and fasten off. So now that that part is done, we will go ahead and seam the top of the slipper with the remaining tail. Before we seam the slippers shut, go ahead and weave in all the tails inside. So it's easier. Weave in all the tails along the side of the slipper and not along the base. You can weave in this along this side and this tail along the opposite side. So go ahead and weave those in before you proceed. I will be just showing you how to seam the top now, but you have to first weave in before you join me and seam the top. To seam the top, use this tail left and you will be going under one loop on this side, which is the back loop, the loop at the very edge, and one loop on the other side. On the other side, you will only be having one loop in any case because that is the foundation chain side. So go under one loop of this side and one loop of that side and work a whip stitch. Go under one loop or the back loop of the side near you and one loop on the back side. So keep working whip stitch. Keep working whip stitches like that until you sew almost a little more than 2/3 of the slipper shut. And once you complete seaming 2/3 of the slipper shut, the very last whip stitch should go under 2 loops on each side, just to make sure it stays secure. So now I'm going to go under both the loops on this side, and I'll catch 1 extra loop. Even if there's no loop, I'll just make sure I dig a little deeper and then complete my slip stitch. And then I will go into my work, make a couple of knots here, or make just 1 knot, and then I will weave it in along the side here. This step is going to be a little hard, but you can just bring it up like that and then weave that in along the side of the slipper. And it's going to look like this once you finish. If you use the same color yarn, the seam looks nice, and this is how the sides will look. So that's how you make your knit look slipper from a rectangle.